So JD Vance, the vice president-elect of the United States, he was asked on Fox News Sunday about who President Trump would pardon day one with regard to January 6th. And he said the reasonable thing, which is people who are guilty of non-violent offenses will be pardoned. People who did violent things against cops should not be pardoned. Now, I know there are a lot of people online who are very angry about JD Vance saying that. I don't know why. If you assaulted a cop, it seems to me you should go to jail for whatever reason you assaulted the cop. Here's JD Vance saying, what is the rational and reasonable thing?
January 6th pardons, President Trump says there's a process. Where is the line drawn on who will and wouldn't be considered for a pardon?
I think it's very simple. Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
Okay, so again, what he's saying there is perfectly reasonable and rational. And there are people online who are, of course, going nuts. That everybody should be, they're all political detainees. I mean, some are, and some assaulted cops. And that's not quite the same thing. By the way, JD Vance saying the same thing with regard to Greenland. So he's asked, Donald Trump has said that he's not going to rule out military intervention. And JD's like, what are you talking about? Here's JD Vance talking about Greenland. Again, this is what rational politics looks like if you have a high IQ, which JD obviously does.
What's the deal with Greenland and the Panama Canal? Are we using or considering use of military force in any of those situations?
No, look, we don't have to use military force, Shannon. The thing that people always ignore is we already have troops in Greenland. Mm-hmm. Greenland is really important for America strategically. It has a lot of great natural resources. My friend Donald Trump Jr. was there a couple of days ago, and you know what they told him? They want to be empowered to develop. The people of Greenland want to be empowered to develop the resources there. We also need to make sure that Greenland is properly cared for from an American security perspective. And frankly, the current leadership, the Danish government, has not done a good enough job of securing Greenland. I think there actually is a real opportunity here for us to take leadership to protect America's security, to ensure that those incredible natural resources are developed. And that's what Donald Trump is good at. He's good at making deals, and I think there's a deal to be made in Greenland.
Yeah, so again, all of this is perfectly rational and perfectly reasonable. And that's true across the board in terms of how Donald Trump is approaching policy. So, for example, last week, the incoming Trump team said, Donald Trump may not get a deal done in Ukraine day one, but it's going to get done in the first few months. There are going to be talks. It's going to be reasonable. That's right. Mike Walz is the incoming NSA, congressman from Florida. He said, listen, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, they're going to have a talk.
Will the first meeting with Putin be just Trump and Putin, or will this be trying to bring in Ukraine as well, Zelensky, Putin, and Trump?
Well, we haven't set the exact framework for it yet. We're working on that, but I do expect a call for at least in the coming days and weeks. So that would be a step. We'll take it from there.
Walz also continued by saying, listen, it's not realistic to say that we're going to be able to expel every Russian from Ukraine as well. This has been true forever. The Biden administration acknowledges as much. It's just they refuse to actually create policy around reality.
Everybody knows that this has to end somehow diplomatically. I just don't think it's realistic to say we're going to expel every Russian from every inch of Ukrainian soil, even Crimea. President Trump has acknowledge that reality, and I think it's been a huge step forward that the entire world is acknowledging that reality.
Alrighty, so again, all of this is rational and reasonable, and that's what Trump 2.0 is going to be. There are going to be a lot of moments where members of the Trump base are unhappy with the kind of deal Trump is cutting. Why? Because he's the actual president now, and he has to get things done. It turns out getting things done means involving yourself in negotiations where you don't get 100% of everything, but you get most of what you want. There's going to be a lot of that in Trump 2.0 with an incredibly slim House majority and an incredibly slim Senate majority as well. Alrighty, meanwhile, the news continues apace. The wildfire threat in Los Angeles remains very high. The death count has now risen to 24 from 16. That's what officials said on Sunday evening. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Santa Ana winds aren't done provoking the historic LA fires that have so far claimed at least 24 lives. A wind advisory and red flag warning, which indicates extreme fire conditions, were in effect Sunday night, with Santa Ana winds expected to move in by Monday and remain all the way until Wednesday. Apparently, the gusts could reach 45 to 70 miles an hour in certain parts of LA between Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon. And that could make it harder to drop aerial retardant. It could accelerate the spread of the fires. There's a big problem in Altadena, which has largely been burned, which is in the Pasadena area. Also, the Palisades blaze continues to be extremely large. The containment of these blazes is not even remotely full. The Palisades blaze is only 14% contained. It's already burned almost 24,000 acres. That Palisades blaze, which is the one that you're seeing so much on the news, right? You're not seeing as much about the Eaton blaze, which is the one around Pasadena. The one, it really is amazing. Like if you know these areas, and again, I grew up in Los Angeles, so I know all these areas really, really well. If you look at the map, the astonishing extent of the Palisades fire, it's truly crazy. It's approaching Santa Monica in the south, and it's moving along the coast all the way through Malibu, and in some cases, all the way up towards Santa Barbara. That's how far the fire map is moving. And again, a lot of that is sort of a preliminary attempt to prevent people from being caught by surprise, because the idea is if the wind catches correctly, it's going to burn an enormous amount of the dead wood and barren trees that are out there in these areas. But if you look at the actual populated areas of Los Angeles, the evacuation warning zone is now including areas of Bel Air. It is moving all the way toward Beverly Glen. In the north of that particular fire, they have moved the evacuation warning area all the way up to Ventura Boulevard in Encino. It's approaching Sherman Oaks. I used to live in Studio City, which is kind of near that particular area. And then again, parts of Santa Monica are now under evacuation warning. Brentwood is under evacuation warning. Meanwhile, if you look at that Pasadena fire, the Eaton fire, the evacuation warning area is now extending all the way out toward the outskirts of Glendale. It's already hit La Cañada Flint Ridge. These are massive, massive fires, truly massive fires. And so there's a conflation of events here, a confluence of events rather. That confluence of events is horrible wildfires, really, really high winds, enormous seasonal dryness, and of course, incredibly bad policy. Bad policy very often is only exposed when the cover sort of gets ripped off. It's sort of like a termite-infested area. Until you actually break through the drywall and see the termite infestation, you don't realize how bad it is. The fire broke through the drywall, and now you've seen the termite infestation, and it is awful. Basically, the foundations of the entire governmental system in Los Angeles and California more generally have been eaten away at over the course of decades. So it's easy to find sort of excuses for why this particular reservoir was dry, for example, why they had to let it out in order to fix it. Okay, the question is, why weren't there more reservoirs in the first place? And the answer is, California hasn't been in the business of building more reservoirs since like the 1960s and 70s. It's been a very long time. The transformers in the Los Angeles area date back in some cases to the 1920s. Los Angeles and California have been wildly underserved by a far-left progressive administration that has been in place for the past several decades, being ruled by environmentalists and redistributionist progressives. Well, the LA Fire Department chief got herself in trouble, Kristen Crowley did, because she did an interview where she pointed out that the budget cuts had made it difficult to actually fight the fires.
The budget. There's so much talk about it. It was cut 17 million. It was cut this. It wasn't cut at all, according to one newspaper. Was your budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025 cut?
I can tell you, I'm going to even go back further than that. Again, since day one, we've identified huge gaps in regard to our service delivery and our ability from our firefighters, boots on the ground, to do their jobs. Since day one, this is my third budget as we're going into 25-26. What I can tell you is we are still understaffed, we're still under-resourced, and we're still underfunded. So with that, whether it's 7 million, 10 million.
But was the budget cut, Chief?
Yes, it was cut. And it did impact our ability to provide service.
Okay, so she's saying the quiet part right out loud. Karen Bass was apparently wildly furious at her and called her on the carpet to yell at her. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.